If you liked this episode of the Hockey IQ podcast, please leave a like, a comment, and especially review our podcast. If you truly listened all the way to the end and you're listening to this right now, you enjoyed this episode. Please go and give it a 5-star review. That helps us out more than you know. Thank you so much and look forward to the next one. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on George Schmaltz. We're currently in Scottsdale, or are we ripping up in Utah?
Yeah, we're North Scottsdale. This is where we're based, baby. It's good. Sunny days. It's awesome.
Good. We've had quite a few people from Scottsdale on the podcast, including one of my favorite people in the world, Brian Slagaki, who does youth hockey and now works for the Utah Hockey Club.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, actually, I do know that name, Brian. I forgot his last name there. But yeah, we skate with him a little bit in the summer. A lot of the pro guys, when they come back here, they're at the ice tent. So he's out there with the iPad, getting the boys going with their skill drills and different things. He's awesome. You got to know him over the last few years. I think like maybe at the tail end of when I was still playing, he was out there. He's done stuff with Tucson now, I believe. Kind of working his way into the door there with the Utah Hockey Club and obviously their AHL team being in Tucson. So he's a good man. He runs a good practice. Friend of the show, if you will, over here.
Beautiful. Well, talking about skating with the boys, you're obviously retired now. But I'm curious about your journey in developing yourself into the player that you became, because obviously you probably downplay how good you actually were, but you were fantastic.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think, every player and every runway kind of comes to an end, whether you're playing high school hockey or you're someone that plays college or even lucky enough to play pro. So, yeah, man, I just think I still love the game, but kind of going back, I think definitely having a younger brother that was a really good player and playing in the organization in Chicago with the Mission growing up and a little bit with Wisconsin AAA, which I now believe is the Milwaukee Junior Admirals. So, yeah, man, I just think once eventually I got from, the Madison ranks and figured out it was a decent player, and going down to Chicago is probably when I really started playing high level competition. I think, it's as nuts as ever, especially with the youth scene, the teams in Detroit. But you even look at kids coming out of California now and even here in Scottsdale, I think, those showcase weekends, there were like 5 games. They were always where it was crazy. You'd fly into a different city, whether it was in Michigan or it was based in Chicago, or I remember even playing out in LA at the Toyota Sportsplex, where you'd play like 5 games in 2 days or 3 days or whatever it was, and those were kind of like you kind of got like a precursor or a prerequisite to junior hockey, and especially as a 16 AAA team or U18 or whatever it was, you could kind of tell. Where you stacked up and maybe if you could make a USHL team and things like that. So, yeah, dude, it was a hell of a run. I played 8 years professionally. Obviously, played at North Dakota. I think the highlight though was playing at North Dakota. Those days there, especially getting to play 1 year with Nick. My junior year, his freshman year was probably the highlight of kind of the career because that was so much fun playing with your brother and kind of living out that dream. And then got to play against him in the NHL, but just playing against him I think was awesome, and especially at the highest level. But just playing on a team together at North Dakota, being on the same power play, that was pretty sweet.
So who was the shooter, you or him?
Neither of us. That's the thing. I think I should have shot more. I was at the top of the key, kind of working the top of the umbrella on the point. Nick was on the half wall on his forehand side that he's played a ton of games even in the NHL at. But yeah, I think I guess I would be the shooter. He was always looking for me for the one-timer, both being righties, kind of him coming downhill on that right flank, then slipping one back to me. So I would say I guess I was a shooter, but fuck, I should have shot more.
Yeah, I was gonna say Dave Haxtell's not shy about point shots. He's like one of the last guys who kind of uses that as a primary, and even he started to go away from it now, because obviously point shots are a big thing. I feel like nowadays would even be better for where you were, which is an offensive defenseman, where you can be involved in all areas of the game. Um, curious how you came up with your offensive play style. Does anyone ever try to hold you back? You're kind of in that transition away from point shots, especially North Dakota days. That was probably where the
Yeah,
debate was heaviest on like point shots, yay or nay.
Yeah, well, if you can get a nice sifter through, like, with a stick in front, a body there parked out front, I was always willing to shoot it, but I always wanted to make plays like during the cycle, whether I was going D down the wall or I was, maybe a little bit of a give and go, how you see my car kind of pop through that hole. Like, I just always remember watching Duncan Keith and those Chicago teams where they'd work the high cycles. And a lot of the times they were just jumping through holes and ended up maybe on the other side of the flank looking for a 1-2 to open up. Like you could jump through a hole, say at your own blue line right about the dot width, and you could go to the top of the circle, whether you're getting that puck back from the guy on the half wall or continuing on your route on the back side where maybe now it goes from the half wall back up to the point to your partner and he can hit you on the other side for a one timer. So I would say, you know what, my offensive ability, my instinct was always my best asset, especially working with high level forwards. I just think going into pro at sometimes that was minimized a little bit just because of some coaching styles. Like, if you look at the early days in St. Louis, yeah, they had offensive defensemen, they had really good defensemen, Petrangelo, Parayko, but those guys, even Shattenkirk, when he was there for a few years. But I just think they played a different way than I did for sure. They were probably a little bit more, gifted or a little better on the defensive side. But I just thought there was ways where I could have created better, and if you would have gave me a little more rope, it would have worked in my favor. So yeah, that's interesting you say that because that was always something I always just watched those old school, not even old school, but just early 2010 Chicago Blackhawks team, and I loved how they play, man. They play with the puck, and you see it obviously now with the Colorado and some of these teams that are really good with the cycle play. But those old school Chicago teams in those days when they won 3 cups in 5 years, if you watch those tapes, and even you had like Nick Hjalmarsson jumping through holes, and Seabrook was pretty good at moving the puck, and Duncan Keith was always my favorite to
Gustafson, even.
watch.
I mean, like you think
Yeah,
about a guy who's
yeah,
carved out a very niche career.
yeah, at the tail end, in Chicago there. But yeah, man, like that. Those are the teams I always love watching play because Duncan Keith was so good at just popping through holes and finding different pockets, and it wasn't a worry if he ended up in the high slot or on the other side, down by the goal line or even the dot, looking for, sniffing as I call it.
Sniff for chances. So
Yep.
obviously you're master up top. What are some reads? What are some things you can teach kids these days, or maybe some coaches? Teach what
On the
is good
defensive side,
offense from the
or
offensive standpoint. You're up top. You're at the
yep.
point. I mean, obviously you can sift some shots through. One, how do we make sure we're not hitting shin pads? Because that's rule number one. Don't get it blocked.
Yeah.
And then number two, like how do we actually create chances? Because you're talking about hitting holes. Like, what's your read? When are you making your cuts versus when are we just playing it safe?
Yeah, I would start there, just kind of continuing on what we're talking about. Like, you got to be able to get the puck in the coffin corner. So that's that area at the blue line where it's outside the dots, kind of right at the top of the blue line, outside the dots, in that coffin corner. So, where you keep pucks in, a lot of times things get rimmed around, and you got to be able to take that puck from the wall, that coffin corner area at high ice, and get it 4 to 5 feet inside those dots. So now you really change the angle of a shot that's going to be a lot more dangerous, or you're able to, again, just create a little space for your forward to kind of come up and grab that ice. And now I have options. I can go over to my partner if I need. I can slide it back to the wall where again I've opened up ice in that area because I've gotten inside the dots and your head's got to be up. So whether you're thinking shot to the net if you have a guy parked out front, because you always should have a guy right at the top of the paint. And if you can get it to him there, okay, maybe it's a tip, maybe it's a good shot. I always think, and I learned this a little bit later in my career, shoot it high, man. You know what I mean? Like if it's gonna be, if you're shooting a score, it should be right around the ears because no defenseman's gonna block that. Now, if you're shooting for a tip, obviously it's got to be waist high or whatever and a little bit of a sifter. But if you're shooting a score and you can get your feet going downhill, don't be scared to shoot that thing high. I always learn that because a lot of times, especially at the pro level, no one's going to block that. They see that, they kind of move out of the way. So that'd be my first thing if you're looking shot. Get your eyes on the net. Do you have a guy parked out there? Is it a tip shot where it's a little bit of a sifter, or you're shooting a score when you get your feet downhill? Then I would look at maybe, okay, well, if I can, bait this flanker, this winger to come up to me and I can, use him almost as a decoy. So I would suck him in at the top of the key, right around the dot, or maybe a little bit even higher, and then I can make my read. So where am I going to find my 2-on-1? Can I find my 2-on-1 on this guy from my winger coming up the wall, or am I going to make him a 2-on-1 kind of decoy on the other side to my defensive partner? So I'd always think like that in terms of where can I find a 2-on-1? Where can I expose a guy? And from there, you can make your read of, are you going to jump through a hole where I was just talking about a few minutes ago? Or are you going to just, maybe use him as a decoy and slide it to your partner or the guy on the wall and, give him the option to move the puck from there or ultimately throw it on the cage. So, yeah, I just think like the more you can expose a winger, because, wingers, they're kind of dumb a lot of times, they're just,
Yeah, yeah, they're dumb.
they're not centers and they're not defensemen. They're not goalies. So, at times, I think, especially with the wingers and being able to kind of get a guy running out of position where you're selling shot and then make a play to the one of your two flanks, whether it's your defensive partner or the forward coming up. Because finding the 2-on-1, again, I was taught from a guy named Troy Ward, who's coached at Mankato, coached a long time in the NHL, AHL. It's all about finding your 2-on-1. So if you can find a 2-on-1 in one of those areas, you're kind of laughing and you're manipulating the defense.
All right, so we're pulling the puck, and I'm gonna have to steal this term, the coffin corner. Like that's
Yep.
just a great visualization, because it's such a terrible spot to be in if your space is already closed down. Like
It's
you've
the
got
worst.
nothing.
The worst. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're just like Brett. Like if you ever watch Burnsy on, especially when he was with San Jose, he would shoot. I'm not kidding. Like 15 shots a game in that coffin corner, and he was probably the coffin corner specialist. So he would actually, back in the day when the puck would go low to high to Burns, and we used to work on this a little bit in practice, especially in the National League because coaches got obsessed with it. Like, oh, look at Burns. He's shooting from the coffin corner. He's getting tips. And theoretically, yeah, but it was almost like a whip play. And he was the best to ever do it in that area. But the puck would come low to high from the goal line to the blue line. If you ever watch those San Jose teams, especially Jumbo and Patty Marlowe, they would actually bank the puck purposely off the wall and it would kind of come up just like 2 feet inside the coffin corner. And he would just 1T whip every time. And it was something that Burns was so good at. But coaches, especially like when he was in his prime, got so obsessed with it. We'd be working on that play like 5 to 10 minutes after practice, every practice. It's like, guys, it's Burnsy. Yeah, like the 1T from that area, if the forward angles it perfectly and it doesn't bounce and there's some traffic at the net. Yeah, it's a good play, but I was always a big believer of getting that puck and bringing it inside the dots just to make plays and greater your chance. But coaches love that play. It's like, all right, uncle, you're sitting in line, you've got 8 defense when you're having a smoke, and like, this is what we're working on. We're stationary one timers from this area, but Burns was the best at it.
Another thing I'm curious about, as you're talking about like coaches, they always get excited about the latest greatest thing or someone who is just exceptional having success. It's like, well, he can do that. I get that.
Yep.
But I'm curious just from like practice styles because I remember watching AHL practices before I went on the ice up in Cleveland, and a lot of the opposing teams would have just like 5-on-0 drills everywhere across the ice. It was just like diagramming set plays, which
Yes.
not the hardest thing to coach against when you're the opposition. Like they may get lucky and get one or two, but realistically, you're not creating much. It's kind of that creativity and creating the space. And to your point, like pulling it and giving yourself options where you can actually start reading a play. Curious if you started to see that. I know, and from my vantage point with coaches, we're seeing a lot more small area games, a lot more,
Yep.
you know, I call them continuous drills where you got like 3-on-3 where it starts with the rim and then it's just go live, but we're practicing scenarios rather than the old 5-on-0s.
Yeah, the 5-on-0 drills were brutal. Like, unless it's just a warm up drill where you're doing like a 3-man weave, even I was just so brutal at a 3-man weave because I was just uninterested. I was like, all right, let's just start practicing. Let's get going. So, 5-on-0 drills, even on the power play, like a lot of the times you'd practice like a 5-on-3 with no one in there and it would be 5-on-0 and guys would be fucking up. Then coaches are going nuts. Well, guys, like, get us some real like game reps here. Like, get some guys in here. Yeah, we don't have to take one timers off the top of their feet, but if we're doing 5-on-0 reps, it just creates a sense of, okay, like let's just relax and we're not really interested. And then, the passes are always fucked up. So I was never a big 5-on-0 guy, but you say 3-on-3 drills, 2-on-2 drills, all those like game like things where you kind of just drop the puck and play. I love that because that is real hockey. And I think the biggest thing with a lot of times coaches, they get lost in the art of, maybe get their whistle going too much, or they're in a controlled scrimmage versus I think just let's make everything as game like as we can. And the more you operate in traffic, the more you can make plays in chaos, the more you have to get in and out of different holes and scenarios of corners or net front play and make and operate under that chaos or under that stress. Well, now we're really creating something. Now we're actually learning how to play and use our bodies. Now we have to, okay, I go into a corner. How do I peel this thing out? Take 2 steps inside to the dot and make a play, whether it's the middle of the ice, back to the, you know, around the boards or up to the slot. Like there's just, I'm a big believer in like, you got to operate in chaos. You got to be able to operate in traffic. All the best players in the world, that's how they play. If you can play in traffic and you're really good at it, and you can make those little plays, those 3 to 4 foot passes, and then get to the net. Well, now you're a really good player because a lot of guys they can play outside the dots. They can play when their heads up and it's easy and there's no pressure. But how do you react when you have stress? How do you react when you have to go pick up a puck in a pile, make a play? That's when you can really find like elite brains, and it's always those guys that can think 2 steps ahead, so they know where when once they get that puck they know where they're going. It sounds simple, but it's a really highly effective skill that not a lot of guys have.
I like that last piece you just talked about as well, of just like knowing where you're going to go with a puck before you get it. Like just
Yep.
keeping the play moving, like those simple little plays where it doesn't get bogged down or cause, turnover, and you're the cause of the play basically coming to a stop, which every defensive coach will tell you what they want, which is the puck to stop. So
Right.
everyone can shrink, compress, especially with today's NHL, everything's 4 go, 5 go into small areas and try to get the turnover that way. But just like I know with my own kids that I'm coaching at high school level, a lot of them struggle with just having an idea of what to do when they get the puck. Like they get the puck, and now we're going to try to figure things out, which is obviously way too late.
Yeah. I just look at it like from even the defensive side, because that's what I know best is you talk about when the puck stopped. So if you go in there and you fish it out, where you have to know before you fish it out, especially at a stop when you can look around and evaluate where all of your guys are, where this puck's going. And usually when it's on the wall, it's going to the middle. And when it's in the middle and you have, a play, if say if you're rounding in the net, you're gonna look you should be looking middle every single time. That's the biggest thing. But I just think, like you said, when guys don't know what they're gonna do before that, well, it's like it's not that hard of a skill to be able to think like that. Theoretically, it shouldn't be because you should know where your outs are at all times. Like, and you should know who's on the ice. Are you playing against a top line? Are you playing against a fourth line with a guy on the team that might blow you up? Like, you should know all these things. You should know hands, who's on the ice, and where the puck's going. Those are the 3 biggest things. Like when you step on the ice, you got to have a purpose. And I think I think a lot of kids like they don't even think about that. Like you should know every team that you play on, you should know what every guy's hand is, and then the opposition, you should know every guy's hand as well, and what kind of style of player they are, and then where the puck's going once you get it, because that's how you stay dialed into the game.
Yeah, I call that like building the mental map. Like if you have a map, things are a lot easier because now you can structure things out and it comes down more to spacing and timing.
Right.
But just having an idea of all that. But we were talking with Marty St. Louis on this podcast, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I knew exactly where people were in their shifts,
Yep.
where they were basically going with their momentum, handedness to your point, and a few other things." And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's inside of an NHL like elite brain where like he's got maybe 10 things going on in his head. The rest of us, we just get like one or two. That's a good start. And then we can just keep adding pieces. Like handedness for me is super critical. Like I know so many youth players, they just pass to the person, like right
Yep.
into their body. So now we got to fish pucks out of skates rather than, okay, what side of the body are we looking for shoulders? Do we just know it already based on who we're playing with and scanning around a little bit? Like it's such a critical factor. Um, and also, by the way, I wanted to make sure I mentioned this before I forgot it. Nick never outscored you when you guys played together, which is great.
No, No, he didn't. No, I think. Well, his freshman year, yeah, he was playing a little banged up, but yeah, I think I had 28 or 29 points that year, and he had 26. So yeah, I clipped him for sure. Easy, light work.
Yeah, I mean defense. Come on, goal
Yeah,
scorers first. Then we got to figure out how to stop the opposition.
yeah. No, but to your point about Marty St. Louis, yeah, like, I mean, if you want to get into the real weeds of things, I would know what second or what point of the a guy's shift they're at on the ice. Are they fresh? Are they tired? Because then you can really hem them into a zone. Or if I'm rounding the net and I know the guy doesn't have great legs because he's at the end of the shift and he's forechecking me, well, now, and if I'm fresh, I can turn it up and I can wheel the net and I can get a lot of speed and then hang them right on the backside. I just think there's so many different things that goes into a mind of a guy playing at not only the pro level, well, the smart guys, but maybe some of the dumber guys know. But I just think there's so many scenarios, like you got to know who you're playing against, what point of the shift they're at, their hand, what they play like. Do they finish hits? Or they get a little bit softer? Do they even forecheck? There's so many different things that go into it. And then you talk about passing. Now passing, that was the biggest difference between an NHL practice and an AHL practice, was passing. It always came to anything at the National League level, on the tape, forehands, never in the feet. Guys could handle a hard pass on their backhand because you got to have a firm bottom hand. The American League, a lot of times it was all over the place. You have younger players, maybe not as dialed in. They're out in Tucson at Gentle Ben's the night before, and they're a little bit hungover or whatever. Hanging out with a girl at University of Arizona. It just that was the biggest difference I noticed was the passing between those two leagues, especially in practice. And I don't know how it is. I haven't been to a youth practice lately or, been on the ice with those kids, but I can imagine that the passing sometimes as a coach, you're like, come on, boys, like dial in, like such a simple skill, but so underrated. I mean, passing is essentially the whole game.
Yeah, how else do we work together? Like
Exactly. Like,
you communicate with the puck. Like I
right.
almost call it like a technical and tactical empathy of like technical empathy is like where do you put a guy's puck? Like are you putting it on his forehand or backhand and why? Like
Yes.
Panarin loves in the rush to like put it on his forehand even if it's behind him. Like that's just the way he wants to open and operate. Like
Yep.
you should know that tendency that he loves. Or like some of the smart guys will lead you where you need to go. Like Clayton Keller's a classic example. I'm not sure Nick is the guy he needs to help with, but like he'll put pucks to places, whether it be area passes or tape to tape on forehands and backhands to lead guys to the space they should be going into to help the next play, where
Mm-hmm.
it continues to speed things up or puts it towards, his advantage or his teammates' advantage and really screw the D.
Yeah, and being able to manipulate a guy's toe caps, like can you make them turn a little bit one way or the other, especially on a 2-on-1, or it's an entry over the blue line and a defenseman? Can you do subtle things before you pass to manipulate a guy's stick? Do you see under the triangle? Does it have to be a saucer pass? Is it a pass where you can put it on the backside of them a little bit at their feet, where again you're talking to a guy can skate into it? And a lot of times that's used on a 3-on-2 with a guy driving the middle. Can you put it on the backside of his feet? There's little area plays. Like there's so many different things that go into passing too, where again that can be taught, but a lot of the times it's got to be seen and felt by players. Like you should always be watching guys like that. Like even my brother, like you talk to guys in the National League, like he's one of the best passers in the league. Like you got to watch how the guy passes, and at the same time, when you're about to make a pass, like get your feet moving. Like it sounds simple, but if you're a winger and you get it on the wall, like take 2 steps to the middle of the ice if you can, to give yourself a little leeway and forward momentum. It's just, yeah. I
Or
I,
like
I
even
got
like drawing a kid in, like a classic
yeah.
example is like you make a pass, but like what did it actually accomplish? Like you just threw a puck into traffic rather
Yep.
than like draw a player in, take that piece off the chessboard and give your, teammate a little more of an advantage.
Yeah, it's the old classic, just throwing burgers out there, shoveling shit. Like, just don't give me a burger. I always talk about that if I was playing with a young defenseman, especially in the minors, where you're a little bit of a leader. I was towards the end of my career. Like, don't just shovel shit. Like, if you're gonna pass it to me, make a good pass. Don't throw a burger in my feet, and then I get ran, and now I'm pissed off coming back to the bench. Like, put on my tape, pass it hard. How do those kids in high school pass? Are they passing with purpose? They're passing hard. Like that was always a big thing. Like fuck, pass the puck hard.
I'm curious, like, what were you teaching? So you're at the tail end of your career. Like, what are you passing back to the defenseman coming up or your partners that you're because right, you need them in order to perform better. So if they're screwing you constantly, that's a problem. So like, what are you giving to them of like, okay, here's what we need to be doing. Here's what you need to be looking for.
Yeah, I would say just building from the goal line or below the goal line in the defensive zone out. I would say got to be first touch. You got to get back to pucks hard, whether you want to or not. If you don't get back to the puck first, if we don't get back to the puck first, we're going to be spending a lot of time in our zone. That's just what the stats say. That's just how it is. That's the game of hockey. If we can't get first touch and we can't make a play on that puck, well, now we're on the outside, and there's probably a good chance we're going to get hemmed in, or we're going to be spending a lot of time in this zone. And as you know, how I played, I don't want to spend any time in this zone. I want to get to the fun zone. So that was always a big thing for me. Let's get to first touch and let's make a little play. Now, when we get back to that puck, where are we going with it? Is it going to be a D dink where it's going to be to the middle of the ice? So going back behind the net where I can scoop that thing up. And now I got it as a partner releasing from theoretically the front of the net. Or is it going to be back up the wall? We got to read numbers and we got to read colors. So you got to shoulder check when you're going back for that puck and how much time do you have? So is the guy going to be coming on, say, your left or your right shoulder? If you're going back for that puck in the right corner, if he's on your right shoulder, well, the good chance is it's going to be going back behind the net and I can pick that puck up on a little bit of a D to D. If he's coming on the inside of you on your left shoulder, well, now you probably got to make a play to the wall or the middle of the ice. Now you got to identify the F2. Where's F2 at? Is he coming probably the dot lane or is he coming on the wall? A lot of times F2 is going to be coming down the wall, just how teams forecheck. So now the centerman's got to do a good job of communicating with you where it's going to be a play to the dot. So just like little things like that. Like I think like building from the D zone was always things that I wanted to work on because if we had crispy exits, now we're spending time in the ozone, and when we get to the ozone, just make sure you give me the puck. That's what I would tell them.
Yeah, and not in the coffin corner. Try to get
No,
you inside the
no.
dots,
Yes,
where you got
exactly.
left, right, and center available to you, rather than up the garbage and hopefully get to a middle. And if smart guy's going to cut you off from there.
Yeah, I just think from like you gotta be able to identify numbers and colors. Like, what do we have? How many forecheckers are coming? Where are they coming from? And again, let's shoulder check so we know that. And if we have time and we can get our toe caps up the ice and make plays in a sense of, yeah, it's easy when you're facing the play, but when you're facing the glass, like that's when you got to be, a really capable and solid defenseman of okay, we got to make plays despite heavy pressure and we got to identify it quick. But I just don't think enough kids even really talk a ton. Like it sounds so dumb, but I just remember like hearing that, especially in college and even my first year pro, coaches, players, veterans harping on communication. I'd be like, yeah, all right, whatever, dude. Like we can just solve this. We don't need to talk. Like talking's stupid. But man, the more you communicate out there, and especially when you're the eyes for a guy like that, going back for a puck or different things that they can't see, you start building that trust with communication. It's so huge. Like I can't stress it enough. That was one thing where I was like, probably my second or third year pro, I realized like, wow, like you actually do have to talk because this game is so fast at this level, and it only helps us out. So that was like such a skill. I was just like, I thought I was like too cool to talk for the longest time, and then kind of realize you got to be barking out there.
I like that phrase. Like you got to be the eyes for the guys. Like help them out,
Yeah.
make it easier. Because to your point, like if a guy's going back on a puck, he's got enough to worry about. Especially if someone's breathing down his neck. Like
Yes.
help buddy out. Like he obviously doesn't want to be in this situation. This is terrible.
Yeah. Or he's in the corner. And the only exit out is through the middle, and you got to be just like you got to give him just that reassurance or that you only got two eyes. Like you can see the whole play. Like help a guy out. So yeah, talking, I would be stressing. I know it sounds so dumb, and I always used to think the same thing when coaches were talking. I'm like, dude, shut up. We'll talk whenever, but we'll talk in the locker room. But you got to communicate on the ice. It's huge.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious because it sounds like. and maybe I'm reading this wrong, kind of around that idea of like self-reliance versus like having that support system and being able to trust others. Because like as our rebellious teenager selves that we were, like you kind of want to make the mistake yourself. Um, but obviously, as we get older, we start to realize, oh, maybe we can stand on the shoulders and learn from these people who have been there, made the mistakes, and we don't have to make the same mistake as they did. I'm curious, what was that journey like for you? Because obviously, you come to these realizations, these points in life where things really sink in. And as a coach, like I want to try to help my players learn these things as early as possible. So they're making, you know, not they're always going to make, I would say, the same amount of mistakes, but hopefully better mistakes where we're constantly growing in the mistakes that we're making, where it leads to better performance in all aspects of life.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I think you can't be scared to make a mistake, and I think plays should always be made, and creativity should always be explored, especially on the ice, and especially at levels below college and junior, and even so when you get there, I think there's always going to be a time and place for creativity. And now coaches will always want players to play in a system and play within themselves, and you got to know how to manage a game, and yeah, yada 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 that way. But I do think not being scared to make those mistakes, but if it's a continued mistake, or you're seeing the same results from similar plays, and it becomes a pattern, and you know different things in the sense of, okay, well, this is what we see with you, and you got to sit a guy down and tell him, hey, like you got to stop this. Like we show him the video and it's 10 of the same plays or whatever. But I don't know, man. I think, like, for me, like, just I think you kind of learn, like, as you go, and it's a natural process, and especially at a younger age, I think you're always going to play, like, you're not going to get sad or anything like that. But I don't know. I think, like, just having a sense of why it's happening, and the further you can kind of explore, but at the same time, just have the wherewithal of, like, the realization or the self-awareness to kind of know, like, okay, like, this is why it's happening, identify the problem, and then kind of move forward. But I don't know. That's a hard question. You kind of got me a little. You got me thinking. Like, I don't know exact. I think it's kind of a natural process for players, but I don't know. Yeah, that's
All
a
right,
good
all right.
question.
Let me see if I can explore this in a different
Yeah.
set, in a different way as well. Because like for me, it also comes back to like an identity. Like every player has an identity of some sort, and like role is very relative. Like you got in a logjam there in St. Louis where the right side was just unbelievable.
Yep.
Like even Pareko, coming up as like a sixth defenseman, like he's all right. Like
Yeah.
now everyone
He's
sees it, but like or like think of a player coming in. Okay, like I've always worked half wall my entire life. Well, okay, we're
yeah.
going into Chicago, and Patty Kane's been the half wall guy for the last 7 years. Like, you think you're just going to step into that? Like,
Yeah.
how do you
Okay.
manage that like identity piece and finding like you don't want to lose yourself and your confidence, but also you have to redefine and adapt to a situation.
Yeah. Okay. So I see where you're going with it. So identity. Yeah. Like, you're looking at a lineup, and you're looking like I'm not going to be on the power play. I'm not going to be the first, second, or I'm not even gonna be in the top six. But I was that my whole life. How do I change my identity, or how do I fill a role where a void is needed on this team? So I think, from a player standpoint, say, like, at a level you're coaching, or even in junior, you got to be able to play definitely one or two styles of play. If not, you got to be able to play any way you want. We can play a heavy, you can play a skill game, you can add elements of, yes, I can penalty kill, I can play on the half wall. I can have all these intangibles, so I know when I get to the next level, okay, maybe not right away, I'm going to be given the key to the city. That was a big thing for me. When I stepped into pro, I knew that the team was stacked on that right side, but at the same time, just the confidence I had leaving school, and the conversations I had with Doug Armstrong and the scouting staff there, if I played a year in the minors and lit it up, I have a good chance of cracking the lineup for the Blues and just doing my thing. And, I went down to the minors my first year, had almost 40 points in 70 games, pretty good for a defenseman. At the top of the league at the time for AHL rookie defenseman. So I was just like, fuck, I'm on pace. I'm going to come in there. They're going to trade Shattenkirk or someone. They're going to get rid of someone, and I'm just going to step in and be a power play guy. And that was not the case. It was a winning team. It was a team looking to win a Stanley Cup. So where did I really fit in? Well, there was a bottom pair defenseman in a penalty kill role and play tough. And that was something I never did in my entire life. And I was so hard headed, and I got so down on myself, and it ate away at my confidence where I thought I was a complete pigeon, only playing 10 to 13 minutes a night, being asked to block shots, play heavy defensively, where I almost took it personal, or I did take it personal, and it affected my play. And it almost made me feel like I wasn't good enough. And then that was hacking away at my confidence and ultimately my attitude. So not only my attitude was shit, but my confidence was bad, and I didn't know how to react to that. Where if I would have just went in there, and hindsight's always 2020, and been a good soldier, I would have gotten to the point of being that player. But I didn't realize that. I thought it was going to be like that forever. So it really discouraged me. And you don't really see that as a young player, and you don't have any really telling you that at the National Hockey League level because, again, managers, coaches, they're all trying to win a Stanley Cup. They're not worried about the bottom end of their roster, even though I was a first-round pick. So relating that story to guys now, it's like you see it all the time. You see even a Brandon Hagel. The guy doesn't even get signed by Buffalo. Then he goes into Chicago. He plays in Rockford. He's a solid player. Gets traded to Tampa Bay, and look, he's playing on the Four Nations team. He's going to be on the Olympic team. Like, there's just so many layers and levels to hockey, and there's so many good players out there. So to realize and identify early that yes, okay, on this team this year, I might not be the player I want to be. It's just how the deck is stacked. There's a lot of good players. I'm not going to be on the half wall, but how can I play meaningful hockey? How can I have a meaningful role on this team to still contribute? And that is where I think the disconnect is for a lot of the players. But the guys you see do it, man, you get in the door, and at worst, maybe you're a role player, a third or a fourth line guy. But you keep building on your stock, you keep working on your game. Stuff changes, especially in pro hockey with the cap and trades and guys sign wherever. You can find yourself back into that role. It just might take a little more time. So, yes, right out of the gate, if you're not given the keys to the city of what you think you can do, well, okay, now you have to identify how to be a different player. And that's what comes back to having all those different intangibles and skill sets, being a Swiss Army knife at an early age of, okay, I can be a forechecker, I can penalty kill. Yes, I like playing the power play in the top six clearly, but how can I contribute in a way where it's not as sexy of a brand of hockey? Me, I thought I was just gonna, show up in a fur coat every game, go out there, have 1-on-1. Let's go for a steak after, and that's my game. That's the only player I could be. I want to be the star, baby, right away. So yeah, I just think if you can identify that and definitely just add layers to your game and understand that shit changes quickly in the business. And that was something I couldn't really wrap my head around at the time.
Yeah, those elements. I have plenty in life where it's like, if only. But it's so true. Like, you just need to find a way to be useful. Like, as a coach, I'm just looking for someone who can help us towards victory, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I want to develop my players, but you also need to understand, like, this is what we need. And if you can add on top of that a little element and continue to prove yourself, like, I always tell my high school kids, I'm like, we don't really promote sub performers. So you just got to be really good at what you're doing now, and that will afford you the opportunity that you probably want to actually have. But
Yeah.
if you're not doing great at what we have and what we're assigning you, like, it's hard to find the reason to give you more.
Yeah. I wish someone would have told a young Jay Swish that. I wish someone would have told me, be a good soldier, get your foot in the door, play well in this role. This is what we need for you right now. And then, okay, well, who knows where this goes? Like you were talking about, rewarding your own players, promoting within. Nobody ever told me that. And it's not their fault. I should have figured it out. But I think from a coaching standpoint, if you tell your players that and you give them like a path to see the light, I just think it goes so much further, even for them just being on your side, wanting to play for the team, wanting to play for you, um, laying a roadmap out clearly. Like, yeah, obviously nothing's guaranteed, but this is what we need from you this year. Say you're an underclassman, and I do see your skills, and you continue to work and get better. Well, you're going to be one of those guys on the power play next year or the year after. It's like someone would have gave me like a little bit of a roadmap, or just like like, oh, okay, I understand that. Yeah, let's do it. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case.
Well, to your point, maybe defense wasn't your best attribute, but you were pretty good at developing goalies. Like I think we got Phoenix Copley, Billy Husso in the NHL, and of course the
Bennington.
guy who just won the gold medal here, Bennington.
Yep.
I think you're pretty good at developing hockey players, especially goalies.
Goalies, man. Yeah, we had all three of those guys at one time. It was crazy. So it went Huso. They were all horny on him. I mean, Billy's a great goalie, but he was the number one prospect. Then you had Phoenix Copley, who they traded for twice. He did 2 tours. And then Bennington, who they wanted to write off. Bennington was a guy, I've told the story all the time. He was my roommate the year he was in Chicago. He was our third string goalie. Marty Brodeur called him. We were in our apartment in Arlington Heights and basically told him, "You're going down to the coast, Binner." And he goes, "No, I'm not." So he stayed put. He hung out in Chicago. He didn't even come on a couple of road trips. Like, he was literally our third string goalie. Like, the guy was far removed. He was basically a practice goalie at that point. And then the following year, they reassigned him to Providence. So they were like, you know what, you're not even going to play in this organization. You're going to go play for the Bruins in their organization, but you're still getting paid by St. Louis, but you're going to play in Providence. Had a great year there. Ended up coming back to San Antonio, and Huso got hurt, and the rest is kind of history where Binner was able to step into a role. But I view goalies as like kickers. Goalies are just fucked. Like, there's so many good ones. It's whether how they're playing at the time, how they feeling. Goaltending is just a crazy position to me. One day you're worth 70K, and the next year worth $6 million. So I don't know. Goalies, I still can't figure them out. These guys are just they're fucked three ways a Tuesday. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but that's what they are.
Well, I'm curious, like from your vantage point, like you've obviously seen players that have hung point per game plus in the AHL versus guys that did not do that and have made their way up the ladder, and then obviously Bennington going all the way to number one for Team Canada. Like from your viewpoint, obviously knowing the stuff that goes on away from the rink as well, like what kind of drives those guys to like hit that next level? Or I'm assuming they're not all like McKinnon, where we're dialed in and we're not eating pasta and dairy and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is you got to figure out what works for you. So a guy like my brother or William Nylander, I'm going to use that example because I just saw him in Utah, family friend. He played with Nick in Chicago growing up with the Mission. Those guys, those guys just beat to their own drum. They're like chill. They're going to work out, but they're not going to be, they're going to be dialed in with what they eat and everything. And they're going to do all the things that make them good. But a lot of the times they understand that sometimes rest is a weapon. And when the lights are on, that's when they fucking snap. That's when they come on and, it's showtime. Then you got guys at the other end of the spectrum, or not even those guys are, I would say, probably in the middle or to the right. Then you got guys at the far right side of the extreme of the Nate McKinnon, where it's zone 2 cardio after a game. He's working out all the time. He's not eating pasta. He's no ice cream. Like, those guys are nuts. So I would say for AHL guys, finding their ways, there's a mix of all of it. And there's guys even on the far left side that are, they eat whatever they want still. It's a little less these days just because of the science and, everything that goes into being a hockey player. You got to keep up with the Nate McKinnon. So you kind of got to be more dialed in. But yeah, I just think there's just so many different ways to skin a cat. And I just look at one example as like Ivan Barbashev. Like, Ivan Barbashev in the American Hockey League my first year as a second round pick, just outside of the first round, was getting scratched a bunch. He was a 19 or a 20-year-old kid playing on a shitty American League team, and they were still scratching him. It's like, what are you guys doing? This is not helping his development. And then the following year, he got some games in St. Louis, kind of carved out, again, what we were talking about, just a role. He was filling a void they needed on their fourth line, learning to play, getting accustomed to the NHL game, playing fourth line. did that for a couple of years, 3, 4 years, and look at him in Vegas now. So he's a guy that just stayed in the pocket and just basically put his head down and worked. So that's like such a good example for me of just kind of tying this all together. Is did I see Barbie as a perennial piece of a Stanley Cup team? Like I saw the skill, but just like everything he added in his game from the American League, even into the National League, like I just give that guy so much credit, and he's so humble and one of my favorite players to watch now because he's like heavy skill. Like he can blow guys up. His reverse hits are great. He knows how to play with guys like Eichel, the top dogs. So yeah, it's crazy, and I think just when you're in the American League, I think you can see why some guys are still there and will never get out. You can identify that pretty quickly. You can identify who just the veterans are, or they're never going to get a call up, and then you can identify probably 5 to 8 guys that legit could play NHL games, and it's going to come down to their habits. How many games are they going to play? Is it going to be 50? Or is it going to be 500? And a lot of times that comes down to, again, what we talked about, identifying, and then their habits. Habits are, you can tell pretty quickly who's sitting on the couch smoking weed, drinking Mountain Dew, versus the guys stretching or watching video and, continuing to always want to get better and, be a rink rat. You got to be a rink rat. You got to love hockey. If you don't love hockey, you're going to get fizzled out pretty quickly.
All right, we'll do a little rapid fire on just your thoughts and development paths of people you've seen, been around, etc. So let's start with probably my favorite guy since Peter Forsberg, Johnny Gaudreau.
Ooh, the late Johnny Gaudreau, one of the best, one of my favorites. Same birth year, played against him I played against him when he was on the Boston Icemen, the Philly Little Flyers. I never forget the first time I saw Johnny Gaudreau. It was at the Prospects tournament in Toronto in the summer, and we were probably 10 to 12 years old, somewhere in there, playing the Boston Icemen. And this kid that was like 3'7", flop on the skates, breezers or pants as they call them, way too big, gloves too big. We beat that team 7-5 or 7-6. Johnny Gaudreau had all 6 goals, and I was like, "Who is this kid?" And I was obsessed with this game from that point on. Playing against him in Dubuque, playing against him at BC, NHL. Yeah, one of the all-time greats, man. So it's just too bad what happened to him and Maddie. And I think about
Yeah.
those guys all the time, man, every day.
I mean, I always appreciated how his skates looked like they were just not tied anytime.
Slippers.
Like the Buke was hilarious. Like I don't think he did the top three eyelets. Like the flop was literally on top of his laces. You couldn't see his top laces. It was unbelievable. But like just the shimmy he had, it was incredible. I mean, as a freshman, he was like 5'9",
Yep.
maybe. I still think they're generous. He's probably 5'7",
Yeah.
135 pounds. But just like again, finding the spaces, knowing like mentally like where are my advantages and just exploiting them. Like for me, that's what I think of. Another guy that you played against, curious on your thoughts, Slavkovsky.
Slavkowski. Yeah. I played against him in Finland. Just thought he was a big dummy at the time. I thought he had all the tools, big, could skate, played. My one observation was playing against him, played a lot of the game with his head down. Now, if you play with your head down, that is just a cardinal sin. What are we doing? Lift your head up, baby. That's where the game is. So I think he's still a kid though that could develop into, being a perennial power forward. And you're seeing it right now just in terms of, I think he's struggling a little bit this year. Last year he had some spurts where he was pretty good, but he's a young kid, 20 years old. I think working with Marty St. Louis, Adam Nicholas there, they got a good staff in Montreal. So I would say the one observation though, when I saw him when he was playing in TPS for Turku, and I was in Helsinki, was a lot of the game was played with his head down. So I'm just curious. I haven't watched a ton of game film on him. I don't watch a lot of Montreal Canadiens games, but I'll have to tune in and see how he was. I saw him last year at the iconic Mullet Arena, and I saw a lot of the same, but that was really early in the year. So I'm gonna have to tune in and get my pre-scout on Safkowski because the
Standing
tools
habits
are.
still aren't great, but they're much better. And like
Yeah,
the routes he takes are like the nice part about the NHL, like everything is pretty well scripted by the coaching staff.
Yeah.
So he's able to fit in there. I think like Chandler Stevenson's a classic example. I'm like, smartest guy, probably not, but he knows
Yeah.
where to go and he's willing to do the work.
Yeah. Good,
Um,
good, good Sasky boy.
yeah. Another player, Tage Thompson.
Love his game. Skate with him here in Arizona. I was still skate with him. His dad was running skates this summer. Despite me being a washed up retired guy, I was getting out there with him and his brother, along with all the other guys here. But love his game, man. He's come so far. We were roommates in St. Louis. This kid would just sit in his room at like 19 years old and just muck Emo's Pizza, which was a local spot in St. Louis, and game. And he was like built like Bambi. He was built like just a skinny little giraffe. And where he's come, man, after that trade to be, one of the better goal scorers in the entire league. I thought he got snipped on that Four Nations roster. I think definitely he'll be on the Olympic team. I love his game, and he loves playing in Buffalo. And you saw it last night. Even he shed his mitts because Josh Norris took a bad hit. He's to me, he's becoming the face of Buffalo, the Sabres, and I love that shot when he tickles the ceiling on that left side and the one timer comes out on the power play. Um, Great player. Weird stat about Tage Thompson: 17 of his 30 odd goals. I think he's got 34, 35. 17 of them are first period goals. So guy likes to get hot early.
He kind of reminds me a bit of Mario Lemieux, where like you can just tell when he's going to have a night. Like
Yep.
the announcers can start feeling, all right, Tay just showed up, Mario showed up. Because I think Mario's the best player ever. He just didn't have the motor to just constantly compete like Wayne did, where Wayne just wanted to shove it down your throat for all 60 minutes every single
Yeah.
night. Lemieux kind of picked and chose his spots. But when he was full board, there was no one better.
Yeah, well, he needed cigarettes in between periods. His back would hurt a little bit. It's just lay magnificent. What do they call him? Lay magnificent. What? How do you say it?
Magnific? I don't even know. I'm not
Lay
even gonna try.
mag, lay magnificent. Lay magnificent. I don't know. I'm stuttering.
Yeah, but from like behind the scenes, like so you've seen Tage, obviously, his dad, the whole Arizona connection, etc. I'm like, he went from someone that people were very low on, like this guy's playing third and fourth line at the program, somehow gets picked in the first round, really struggles, especially his first year in the AHL, and then it's obviously been just a great rise since then.
Yeah, I just think development's not linear. I think guys develop at different tracks. You can't quit on a player. And once his body filled out, and he's a guy that I worked out with at Exos down here for at least 4 summers, you could see him once he started putting on strength, the confidence came, and then opportunity came. Because if you remember too, when he got traded to Buffalo, he spent some time in the American League. He was in Rochester. It wasn't looking great, I would say, for especially a first round pick and a guy with that much potential. But he slowly worked on his game, and I think to credit to even having a dad that coached and played really helped. So I'm just so happy for him. The way he's developed into this again prolific goal scorer is quite amazing. And I think I firmly believe like he had 47 that one year. I think on a good team, and especially in Buffalo, if they ever fucking figure it out there, he could be a 50 goal guy. His shot is that lethal. His one timer is that good, and he's streaky. Like when he goes and he gets them in bunches, that's a guy that could rattle off 13 goals in 10 games, and all of a sudden he's at 50. So yeah, I love watching him play. Billy Guerin, if you're listening, fella, get that guy in the Olympic team. You need him. You need that size. You can't teach it. Come on. What are we doing? Chris Kreider? Really? Jesus.
He'll be there, no doubt. Um, well, appreciate you coming on. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think we should? Otherwise, I'll let you rep the brands and tell
No,
us
I
what you're
think
doing.
I think that's good, man. Yeah, I'm all over the place. I'm on missing curfew with those guys. So if people listen, I'm on there about 5 times a month, 5 to 7, I would say. So I'm doing that with Obi and Uppy. Uppy, a former teammate in St. Louis. Obi, all-time dude. And then I got my own pods. I got Hockey Night in Scottsdale with the Heat Daddy, Rob Gucci, on Twitter. He's been a Twitter legend forever. So we're based out of Scottsdale. Now listen, if you're tuning into this show, the joke is this is a hockey show. We talk a little hockey. We get a lot other stuff in there too. Get off the rails. So we're doing that 3 times a week. We do live shows. We got a new live show coming up at the Roxy in Vancouver. So that'll be awesome. The old roller, great spot. And then I am on Live in Five with my buddy, Gage Osmus, who was a former captain at UND. Played with him at 3 years at North Dakota and the captain on the national championship team. So, yeah, man, I'm all over the place. Do some NHL radio hits, always buzzing. So that's where you can find me. And then obviously I have a lifestyle and apparel brand, Butter Golf. I'm repping the hat right now. A lot of guys in the league are rocking that. So yeah, we got Butter.golf on that. And then yeah, just trying to stay busy. Still love the game. Still love talking hockey. And that's kind of where I'm at, man. Year 2 of this media side or whatever the hell you call it. So it's been a lot of fun.
It's been good having you out there. And I know you've done some college games. We need to get you to replace Dave Starman as the World Junior guy.
Yeah, I would love to do it. Those jobs are hard to get. I've done a couple games up at North Dakota, TV gigs, but yeah, those are few and far between. A lot of times those jobs don't pop up, but my phone lines are open. I'm willing to go wherever. I would go to Russia and call a game. Fuck it. Why not? Get me to Moscow.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, brother.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.